Morning came quietly over the servant's house. The first light slipped through the doorway and touched the packed earth floor, the low table, the clay jars near the wall. Outside, the city was beginning to wake. A cart rolled somewhere beyond the alley. A rooster called from a roof. Footsteps passed, then faded. Inside, his children were still half asleep. One of them leaned against his mother's side, hair tangled from sleep, fingers curled around a piece of bread that had not yet been eaten. Another sat near the doorway, tracing lines in the dust with a small stick. They were too young to understand the weight sitting at the table with their father. His wife understood. She moved carefully that morning, as if sudden motion might cause the fear between them to break open. She placed bread before him. She poured water. She did not ask the question at first. He stared at the bread and did not reach for it. The debt had followed him home again. It sat with him when he tried to sleep. It woke before he did. It stood beside him when his children laughed. It entered every room before him and waited in every silence. He had told himself there would be time, another season, another arrangement, another favor from someone who still believed he could manage what had already grown beyond him. He had learned how to speak with confidence while fear moved beneath the words. He had learned how to smile at men who asked about accounts. He had learned how to postpone the day that could not be postponed forever. His wife sat across from him. "Will they call for you today?" she asked. He looked toward the doorway. For a moment he wanted to lie. Not because she would believe him, but because hearing comfort aloud can almost feel like shelter. He wanted to tell her the king's court was too full, that the scribes were still working through lesser accounts, that his name would not rise today from the records. But the summons had already come before dawn. A messenger had stood in the alley with the king's seal and a voice that did not tremble. The servant had taken the notice while his wife stood behind him, one hand at her throat. No accusation was spoken in the doorway. None was needed. The servant reached for his youngest child's hand and held it for longer than usual. The child smiled at him, unaware that a father can hold a small hand, as if trying to memorize the shape of mercy before judgment takes it away. He rose from the table. His wife stood with him. She straightened his robe with hands that tried not to shake. There were words she could have said. There were words he deserved to hear. But she only looked at him, and the quiet in her eyes was worse than anger. He stepped into the street. The door closed behind him. He did not turn around. The court was quiet when the servant was brought in. Stone floors held the cold of the morning. Scribes sat near low tables with records unrolled before them. Servants stood along the edges of the room, careful with their breathing, careful with their eyes. The king sat above them all, clothed in authority, with the kind of stillness that made every small sound seem too loud. Outside the hall, the palace moved with its usual rhythm. Water jars were carried through side passages. Hooves struck the courtyard stones. Voices rose and faded beyond the doors. But inside the chamber of accounts, time seemed to slow around ink, parchment, and the throne. The servant had entered that room before. He knew the scent of oil lamps and sealed documents. He knew where the scribe sat, where the guard stood, where lesser men waited for orders. This room had once made him feel important. Now it made him small. The debt was read. 10,000 talents. The words fell into the room like something too heavy for the air to carry. A few servants looked down. One scribe stopped moving his hand across the parchment. Even the guards near the pillars seemed to grow still. It was not a debt a man could work down with time. It was not the kind of sum that could be solved by discipline, sacrifice, or a better season. It was impossible. The servant knew it before the scribes finished speaking. He had lived for a long time as though the day of reckoning would never come. Accounts can be ignored while the sun is warm and the table is full. Debts can be hidden beneath noise, busyness, and the mercy of delayed judgment. But a day came when the books were opened, and the numbers did not bend. He had worn fine cloth in better rooms. He had given orders in the name of another man's authority. He had walked past lesser servants without lowering his pace, his seal ring catching light as though the glow belonged to him. Men had bowed when he entered. Messengers had waited for his word. Doors had opened. But borrowed authority is a thin covering when the account is called. Now there was no desk between him and the truth, no runner to send, no delay to request through another voice. He stood before the throne with every hidden number dragged into the light. His mouth went dry. He looked toward the floor because the throne was too much to face. His hands trembled beneath the weight of what could not be undone. He had nothing in his possession large enough to answer what was written against him. The king gave the order. Sell him. Sell his wife. Sell his children. Sell everything he has. Let payment be made. The room did not move. No one argued. A debt was owed. A reckoning had come. The servant had no defense. Then the man collapsed. His knees struck the stone. His forehead bent low. The dignity he had tried to carry disappeared in a moment. All that remained was desperation. He saw his household in a flash. The doorway of his home, the clay jars near the wall, the small hands of his children gathering at their mother's robe when strangers came to take inventory. He saw his table emptied, his name stripped from every room. The life he had built pulled apart piece by piece until even his family became part of the payment. Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. It was not true, but it was all he had. He could not pay everything. Everyone in the room knew it. The scribes knew it. The servants knew it. The king knew it. The man was asking for time, but time could not turn impossibility into ability. The king looked at him. The court waited for the sentence to continue. Instead, the king lifted his hand. The king had pity on him. No one had expected that. Not the scribes with the records open, not the guards standing ready, not the servants who had watched many accounts settled in that hall. The silence changed shape, as if the room itself had drawn in a breath. The servant expected delay, but the king gave pardon. He expected more time, but the king canceled the debt. He asked for patience to pay what could never be paid, and the king sent him away free. The impossible debt was forgiven. For a moment, the servant could not move. The chains he expected did not come. The guards did not seize him. His household was not torn from him. The record that stood against him no longer held him. The king's word had done what his labor never could. One scribe rolled the record closed. The sound of the parchment seemed louder than it should have been. The servant stared at the hands that had signed so many agreements, taken so much trust, and carried so much debt. They were empty now, empty and free. He bowed again, lower this time. No rehearsed dignity remained in the movement. His forehead nearly touched the floor that had received his first cry. Then he backed away from the throne, step by step, as if moving too quickly might break the mercy that had just been spoken over him. The doors opened. Warm air met his face. Mercy had found him beneath the throne. The light outside was sharp after the dimness of the court. The servant stepped into the street like a man who had walked out of death. The world had not changed, yet everything should have felt different. The stones were the same. The voices in the market were the same. The dust still lifted beneath sandals. But he was no longer carrying the sentence he had carried into the palace. His wife would not be sold. His children would not be taken. His name would not be remembered only as a warning. The mercy of the king had given him his life back. He stopped beside a shaded wall and pressed one hand against the stone. His breathing came hard, not from running, from release. A moment ago, his future had been sealed. Now the market opened before him, loud and bright, filled with men bargaining over fish, women carrying baskets of bread, children weaving between stalls. Ordinary life continued around him as if the whole world had not just been handed back to him. He wiped his face with the edge of his sleeve. Then he laughed. It broke out of him strangely at first, almost like a sob. He covered his mouth, then lowered his hand when he realized no one around him knew what had happened. The sky above the palace looked wider than it had that morning. The air seemed clean enough to drink. He walked slowly because he could. He passed the place where prisoners were chained and did not become one of them. He passed a merchant counting silver and did not flinch at the sound. He passed a father lifting a child onto his shoulder, and his own children came to mind with such force that he stopped in the road. He saw his youngest child's hand in his memory. He saw his wife straightening his robe before he left. He saw the fear in her eyes and imagined walking back through the doorway with news too large for the room. He would tell her slowly, no selling, no chains, no strangers at the door, no inventory of jars, bedding, tools, children. Free. He leaned back against a wall and let his head rest against the stone. A tear cut through the dust on his cheek. He did not wipe it away this time. For a while he simply stood there, alive, spared, sent home. Then the noise of the market returned. Across the street, another servant was carrying a small bundle of grain beneath one arm. He had been watching the palace road without meaning to. Men who owed money learned to notice certain faces. They learned the sound of sandals behind them. They learned when to turn down another street, when to lower their head, when to disappear behind a stall until danger passes. He owed the man from the palace 100 denarii. He had not forgotten. The debt had a smaller shape than 10,000 talents, but it still pressed on him. It had sat beside his own table. It had followed him to work. It had made him count coins at night and count them again after he already knew they were not enough. He saw the man emerge from the palace. At first he stepped back into the shade, but the man did not look like someone coming from judgment. He looked stunned, then relieved, then almost joyful. The fellow servant watched him stop beside the wall. He watched him breathe like a man who had been pulled from deep water. He watched him laugh into his hand. He watched a tear move down his face. Something in the fellow servant's chest loosened. Perhaps mercy had found him in that hall. Perhaps a man who had just received kindness would have room to give a little patience. The fellow servant took one careful step forward. Then their eyes met. The forgiven man's laughter stopped. The man owed him 100 denarii. It was not nothing. 100 denarii could feed a household. It could settle wages, purchase grain, repair a roof, or carry a family through lean days. The debt was real. But the forgiven man did not walk toward him like a man who had just been spared. He walked faster with every step. The fellow servant saw him coming and lowered his eyes. He had been avoiding him for days. He had rehearsed what to say if they met. He had hoped for one more week, one more harvest, one more chance to bring what he owed. He opened his mouth. The forgiven man crossed the street. His face hardened. Before the other servant could speak, the forgiven man seized him. His fingers closed around his throat. The street tightened around them as people turned to look. Pay what you owe. The words were familiar. This time he was not beneath them. He was using them. The fellow servant struggled for breath. His hands grabbed at the wrists around his neck. Dust rose around their feet. The mercy of the palace was only moments old. But outside in the street, the forgiven man had already become cruel. The fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him. Have patience with me, and I will pay you. The words echoed the court. The same bent knees, the same lifted hands, the same desperate request for patience. For a breath, the street held still. But the forgiven man would not listen. Whatever he remembered from the palace did not soften him. He called for officers. The fellow servant was pulled to his feet. His head covering slipped loose. His mouth opened again, but the words were swallowed by the hands that turned him toward the prison. People stepped back to make room. Some looked away. Others watched the forgiven man with the confusion of those who had heard one story from the palace and were now seeing another story in the street. He took the man and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. The door closed. The street grew quiet. Inside the prison, the air was damp and heavy. Iron smelled of rust and old sweat. The fellow servant sat against the wall with dust still on his robe and marks rising at his throat. Outside, the forgiven man walked away with his debt secured, his jaw set, his account defended. But the sound of the prison door did not stay in the prison. It traveled through the witnesses. It followed them through the market. It sat with them beneath awnings and beside water jars. It troubled the men who had seen the servant spared and then watched him refuse to spare. They could still picture him kneeling before the king with his whole life in ruins. They could still hear his voice cracking beneath the impossible debt. Now they could hear another man's voice saying almost the same words. And they could not make the two moments fit together. Mercy had been received, but mercy had not been learned. Other servants had seen it. They knew what had happened in the palace. News of such mercy could not stay hidden for long. A man had entered with a debt beyond his life and walked out released. The king had shown compassion that left the court silent. Now that same man had taken a fellow servant by the throat. The witnesses were not merely annoyed, they were deeply distressed. They had heard the tremble in his voice before the throne. They had watched him leave with his household spared and his debt erased. They had seen his face when mercy opened the door. Now they had seen his hands around another man's throat. They did not speak at first. One servant picked up a dropped basket from the street and handed it back to a woman who had stopped nearby. Another stared toward the prison gate. A third looked back toward the palace, where the king's hall rose above the roofs in the afternoon light. Their sorrow was not loud, but it was deep. So they went to the king. They told him everything. The court gathered again. The air felt different now. The servant who had walked out free was brought back in. and this time the mercy he had refused to show stood as witness against him. He entered the hall where he had knelt before. The same pillars stood around him. The same floor stretched beneath his feet. The same throne waited ahead. But there was no plea on his lips now. The king's voice carried grief and judgment together. "You wicked servant! I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me." The servant stood silent. The records were still there. The scribes were still there. The stone floor was still beneath his feet. Only now he was not pleading. The question came from the throne. "Should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you?" The words hung in the air. The king's anger burned. The guards took the servant from the hall. The debt he could never pay stood over him again. He was handed over to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. Thank you for watching Chrio Hub. Please like this video and subscribe. The grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.